So we're pretty much at the start of a new World Test Championship cycle. So we thought this would be a good time to pick a World Test 11, especially considering actually that some of the bigger sides of the world are undergoing somewhat of a transition period. So it's not as obvious as it would have been 2 or 3 years ago who actually is in a World Test 11. Ben, we picked a team yesterday. There was some disagreement, but we eventually finalised on an 11. Kick us off with the openers. Who are your two up top, but also who did not quite make the cut?
Yeah, so first off, Jaiswal shoe-in 100 on debut in West Indies, 100 in his first test in Australia and England, and made 2 doubles in his first series in India. So early on, all conditions, he's in. The other opener, there were really 2 strong candidates and a couple of others that you sort of pushed away for a bit. The 2 strong candidates were Duckett and Markram. Actually, both were very similar over records in the last couple of years, but they've kind of got there in quite different ways. So Markram has 2 all-time 100s in that time against India on a spitting cobra, and here at Lords in the World Championship final. Duckett more consistent, less sort of massive scores, and actually also they both have quite different methods and strengths and weaknesses, you say. So Markram is probably the stronger player of pace, particularly high pace on fast bouncy wickets. That's the thing that he's really, really good at, up there with the best in the world. Duckett, obviously he's not bad against pace, but against spin, you'd almost say he's better. He's got that reverse sweep as he unfurled yesterday. And actually, a peek behind the curtain, we originally had Markram in the team, and then Duckett then goes and makes one of those match-defining hundreds, and that is a knock, I think, that can push someone into an 11 and something like this, and that is fair enough.
The other thing we did when picking the team was we looked particularly at records going back to the start of June 2023. We thought that was a reasonable time period to look at players' statistics, and Duckett averages 46 in that time, Markram averages about 37. But crucially, the average batter in South Africa, the average wicket is worth 27 runs in South Africa in that period. In England, it's 34. So relative to conditions, it's really not that far off. But eventually went Duckett, just reading through some of the other contenders. Khawaja, Australia's leading run scorer across the last 2 WTC finals, but averages 38 in this period, and a poor 2024 where he averages 25. So I think that counts against him. Crawley actually averages more than Khawaja and Markram in that time, but only 200s, and one of them is right at the beginning of that 2-year period. And there have been some questions over his place in the side, so I don't think you can be in a World 11 if you're not guaranteed of a spot in your own team. KL Rahul only opened 5 times in that period, and then Nissanka averages nearly 50 in that period, but wasn't really in the Sri Lanka team for a bit of it. I think he'd be a pretty good contender if we do this in 2 years' time, but didn't quite do enough in this recent period to justify a spot in the 11. Middle order.
Yeah. So, and I'd say that this 11 overall is stats informed, but not stats dominated, I'd say. Like, you've got to, because it's a smaller sample size, you've got to sort of pick and choose here. And Steve Smith is actually, weirdly, given his statistical freakishness across the whole career, is one that in that period, you'd look at it and be like, there are other players who have averaged more in that time. But the eye test for me over the past, let's say 6 months or so, maybe, going back to some of that Australia series, that India series, he looks as close as he has done since that 2014 to 19 peak as he has at any point since. And even in the World Championship final, obviously it's the nick off to Markram that he doesn't do in that peak. But before then, he was, a batter on another plane on a wicket that, until the 4th innings, no one could get a run on. So he is still there at 3. That is a bit of a fudge. We'll come to the other guys who could have been there in a second. Root, I don't think any discussion either there. He is the best player in the world. And then at 5, Brook, obviously, the statistical case is pretty compelling there. He's averaging, 60 in Test cricket.
World number 2 as well.
Yeah, world number 2 ranked batter. I can see people saying, well, there's English bias there. He's not got runs yet. He's not played in India or Australia. Those are 2 big things he's got to tick. But he still has. It's not true to say that he's done this. In fact, he's not really dominated in England yet. He's had a moderate time across 2 summers while still being very good. It's not as if he's racked up runs against West Indies and Sri Lanka last year. He's actually been at his best in Pakistan and New Zealand, which are 2 places which there's a question about the playing of spin, but I think that can be overblown perhaps in his first tour, which is outside this time period, but still he was very good in 2022 against spin. So yeah, he's in there.
He's got the best average of the middle order lot So I think that's not non-controversial. He's number 2 in the world, recently number 1.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense. I mean, the glaring omission there too, I'd say, Kane Williamson and Kamindu Mendes.
Yeah, well, I also wouldn't say glaring, but if you look at the averages...
And Travis Head, actually, he would have been in this team a shoe-in a year ago.
Yeah, so if you look at the averages, the other one who's big up there is Bavuma. I'd say that Williamson and Bavuma are actually in a similar bracket where for a lot of it, it's actually just because of the games they've missed rather than the games they've played. So Bavuma, it's just because the sample size therefore just isn't big enough, even though he's been captain for 2.5 years now, but he's been injured a lot.
Only played 8 test matches in 2 years.
Exactly, yeah. And then Williamson, he's missed some games, but he's missed the harder games, really, like that Tour of India that they won 3-0 was without Williamson. And then he makes 300s in 4 innings against that South Africa fourth string side when the SA20 was going on. So that's why he's not in there, even though he is obviously a brilliant player. I just think that Smith at number 3, I think I'd take him over Williamson right now. And then, yeah, so Kamindu Mendes, what's tricky as well is that you're picking number 5, and a lot of that work is at 7. There's a bit of fudging going on, but then also it's only a sample size of 13 tests, which isn't massive. Again, I can see him with a Sanka in a couple of years' time. I can also see actually with this 11, if we picked a second string 11, actually there would be quite a few Sri Lankans in it, which you might not, suspect. They were competing towards the end of the World Championship. And then Travis Head is up there with Duckett as the best all-format batter in the world, but tests is the format where he's probably weakest and where, especially over the last bit of time, he's been, I guess, good, but not great, I think.
Yeah.
And that is just fair to
and
say.
did well against India in the BGT, but actually if you go back to 2023, averages 37, which isn't probably what you'd expect. And if you look at the rankings, actually what was surprising compiling this team, we didn't look at the rankings at all, but pretty much if you pick the World 11 based on rankings in various positions and roles, you end up with the team we got, barring a couple of exceptions to the bowling attack that we'll get to. Keeper, we would have picked him anyway, but the Headingley test helped. Rishabh Pant.
Yeah, and he is very, very close to all-time great status already. I think the one question would have been after that car accident, he'd come back and he'd been good. He'd done some good things, but you wondered, was he going to be quite that same player, or how quickly would that happen? And it now looks like that has happened. So that answers any question whatsoever. He is on track to, he might well end his career as the best test keeper bat there has ever been. He is on track to break those Gilchrist records. He's already got, there's only 2 or 3 keepers that have more hundreds than him in Test cricket, and he's younger than Gilchrist was when Gilchrist made his Test debut, so he's already got that kind of head start on him. He is obviously an absolute freak. If he wasn't here, you'd have a really interesting conversation between Alex Carey, Jamie Smith, Kusal Mendes, Mohammad Rizwan, Kyle Verreynne, even Ireland's Lorcan Tucker has started pretty well, but Pant is here. So for what it's worth, I think I'd go Rizwan out of that lot.
He had to spell outside the Pakistan team too recently.
Yeah, but I think that's more to do with Pakistan than with Ron, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough. Cool. All-rounder. I thought this was really difficult. It was a pick basically between 2 all-time greats who aren't at their own peaks at the moment.
Yeah, it was a little bit underwhelming, really, where you think that, the 2 all-time greats being Jadeja and Stokes, and you kind of think that, well, Stokes has only just returned to being an all-rounder, and Jadeja is what, he's 37 and is showing signs of tailing off a little bit. And yet, there's just very few all-rounders in world cricket at the moment. We'll get to the other 2, but there's only really 4 test all-rounders, probably 5, I guess, in the world game, but especially in the top 6. But we went with Jadeja. The other thing is as well, we've tried to make this a team for all conditions, but this is the spot where that's absolutely trickiest, where if you're picking a team for in England, it's definitely Stokes. You'd expect him to outperform Jadeja with the bat and to be much more useful with the ball. But in Asia, Jadeja is close to a cheat code where he can average loads with the bat and he can average 22 with the ball.
And he does a job overseas where he's containing, and even though he might not take loads of wickets, that is really useful when you're constructing a side for overseas test matches. And he still, again, is good enough to do a job in the top 7 with the bat as well. Yeah,
whereas Stokes in Asia, his record with the bat is actively very poor. And he's, it'd be interesting to see how he'd bowl now in Asia, but I don't think you can, it's just an unknown. You can't say that he'd do it.
I think with Stokes, I feel like if we recorded this in 6 weeks' time, the answer might be different, because people might not have realised he's just not bowled very much. So prior to this summer Zimbabwe test and the first England-India test match, he'd only taken 16 wickets in the 19 tests preceding that. He wasn't really an all-rounder, really. if you're having that impact with the ball, fitness reasons as to why he bowls so infrequently. And with the bat, he averages 32 in the last 2 years and no 100 since July 2023. So it's not as if he was averaging 45 in a peripheral with the ball, I think we could have squeezed him in and fudged it a little bit. But I think because of that combination, right now, I don't think Stokes is in that team.
Yeah.
Two guys who were close. Mahedi at Bangladesh has a really good record, averages 37 and 26 with the ball in the last 2 years, but only 2 tests outside Asia. So that's skewed, and also had a poor series against one of the better opposition in South Africa at home too.
Yeah, it's not Bangladesh's fault that they don't play the best teams, but it does factor into when you pick this team. The 100 he's got is against Zimbabwe. Yeah,
and if he had good series against South Africa and away, even from that small sample size, I think that could have changed it. But that swayed it against him. And then Marco Jansen, 33 wickets at 21. He's just not really a 7. That's the thing. It's like 8, yes, but not a 7, and he doesn't quite get in for his bowling alone. Bowlers. So let's go to the 3 seamers. This is where there was fierce disagreement.
Yeah, it was weird because at first when we picked this team, we were like, well, that just picks itself, because you think, the best 3 bowlers in the world, obviously Bumrah, the best in the world, one of the best of all time. And then you think back to the World Championship final, you had Rabada and Cummins, like, well, that's it. That's great. You've got 2 opening bowlers. You've got a first change. It all makes sense. And then
we were like, yeah, done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was that was the easiest bit. And then you remembered, oh, wait, Matt Henry has to be in this team, basically. He couldn't have done any more. He took, 7 foot against Australia, who New Zealand always struggle against. And then he was, among lots of important performances, that was actually perhaps the key one against India at Bengaluru, taking that, that bowled them out for nothing on the first morning. But he is also, I think it's possible that he needs conditions a little bit in his favour, or to be at his absolute most incisive. Even in that Bengaluru test, that was the case, even though it is in India. Like, there'd been a bit of rain and the pitch was just juicy for that first hour of the game, and he absolutely cashed in. But I think there is enough of him as an all-round bowler to pick him in this team.
I think it's just fairness over. We looked at the last 2 years as the parameters, and over the last 2 years, he just couldn't have done any more, really. So 48 wickets at 18, averages of 15 against both Australia and India. Against England, that series they lose at home at the end of 2024. He still averages 23, so he's done very good. He's done a very good job against everyone he's played against. So I'm comfortable with that. Bumrah, 82 wickets at 16, he's in. So Cummins or Rabada, who misses out?
Yeah, and I guess there's again a slight fudge here, because if you're picking someone who does the first change role for their country, it's Cummins, who is one of the best first change bowlers there ever been. But Cummins has actually, from his very, very high standards, not had quite those same numbers over the past little bit of time. You had it. It was 24 and 32 or something at home and away.
Yeah, so it's 84 wickets at 24 overall and an average of 35 in away test matches.
Yeah, so that's just not quite at his very best. And Rabada, just watching him, firstly, when you're as attacking as he is, when you can sort of find ways to take wickets in sort of any situation, he's going to be a pretty good first change. And just looking at that World Championship final, I just came out of it thinking that Rabada he was the standout bowler, even though Cummins took 6 in the game. So that's why we've gone with Rabada. But it's very, very close, and I have no doubt that there will be people who disagree with that, which is fine, because that is picking 3 out of 4 exceptional bowlers basically.
And we're not at all saying that Matt Henry has had a better Test career than Pat Cummins. We're saying right now, if you're picking a team based on the last 2 years, and also with Cummins, actually the other name that we didn't seriously consider, but again, if you look at numbers, arguably has a very good case, is Josh Hazlewood, who's got an average of 20 in the last 2 years, better than Cummins. Finally, the spinner, we went Nathan Lyon, the obvious pick since Ashwin retired, 71 wickets at 24 in that period, which is amazing and actually slightly better than I would have guessed. But if we were doing it on the rankings, if we picked the highest ranked Test spinner, it wouldn't be Lyon. No,
it'd be Noman Ali. And that would be fun to pick him in this team. Look, I guess the thing with him is that firstly there's not actually loads of Tests he's played recently, but it was out of the side for quite a long time. And then Pakistan realised they could just, roll out these absolute ragging turners at home, and that Noman Ali is very, very useful in those. And yet it's also weird, because sometimes in those games I've looked at and thought that Sajid Khan actually looks like the better spinner. I mean, he was brilliant preying on sort of Bazball's hubris, I guess, at times. And he is a very, very good bowler. Obviously, it's a great story, and he, doesn't look like what you think a top-level sportsman should look like, which is also great. But I don't think he is as good a spinner as Lyon. And actually,
46 wickets at 14.
Yeah, but it's and I guess it's one of the things about the rankings. Actually, we wanted to touch on how the rankings work, and it's based on the performances of other players in those games. So sometimes this can really actually help batters who have a really good.
So Joe Root in 2021.
Yeah, well, it can help him if your other players are not good in your own side. But also, if you're a really good batter in a side with a really good bowling attack, you'll be compared against bowlers on the batter on the other side as well. So if your team's making 500 routine and your bowling team's out for 250, that elevates your batting. Whereas actually, it can almost be easier. But then with No Man, it's the fact that he's then being compared against some seamers on these on pitches where there's no assistance and there's lots of assistance for him, and it is just. What is it 4 tests that he's played since he's come back into the side?
It's 6, but I don't think you can pick someone in the World 11 based on 6 tests or in Asia. So there you have it.
Sorry, there was the one more thing on the spinner is just that I sort of wonder if by the end of this series we might have Kuldeep in there. I actually think if I just watch each spinner bowl, for me, actually, I wonder if he might be the best spinner in the world right now, but he's not in India's first team and he's not played enough to warrant us to pick him. But
so there you have it. It will probably change if we did it again in 6 weeks' time. But right now, our World 11 is Jaiswal, Duckett, Steve Smith, Joe Root, Harry Brook, Rishabh Pant, Ravindra Jadeja, Matt Henry, Kagiso Rabada, Jasprit Bumrah, and Nathan Lyon. You almost certainly disagree. Tell us in the comments.